I never thought I'd be the guy who would find himself in this situation, but here we are. My name is Jake, and I've been married to a woman named Melissa for 8 years. At least that's what I thought our relationship was, an unshakable bond built on love and trust. We met in college, bonded over late-night study sessions, and quickly became inseparable. She was my best friend, my confidant, and the love of my life. Well, at least that's how it used to feel. Things started to change about a year ago. I noticed little things at first, subtle shifts in her behavior. She began spending more time at the gym and less time at home, often coming back late with excuses that didn't quite add up. "Just had a yoga class that ran over," she'd say, her voice tinged with a hint of defensiveness. I'd roll my eyes and chalk it up to her wanting to get back in shape. But as the months went on, the late nights became more frequent, and the odd texts I'd catch her sending started to raise alarm bells in my head. I trusted her, I really did, but trust can be a fragile thing, and those little signs of trouble kept gnawing at me. I brushed it off, convincing myself I was just being paranoid. I mean, who would cheat on someone like me? I made a decent living as a software developer, and I thought we had a good life. But the more I tried to ignore it, the more I began to wonder if something was off. The real turning point came one Thursday evening while I was working late on a project. I had just gotten into bed when I heard Melissa come home. I could hear her whispering on the phone, but I couldn't make out the words. Normally, she'd come in, give me a kiss, and we'd talk about our day. Instead, she crept into the bathroom, closing the door softly behind her. My gut told me something was very wrong. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening intently. It felt like an eternity, and curiosity got the better of me. I quietly slipped out of bed and tiptoed over to the bathroom door, pressing my ear against the cool wood. My heart raced as I heard her voice, a tone I'd never heard before, soft, flirtatious, and completely different from how she spoke to me. I caught snippets of the conversation, and my stomach dropped when I realized she was talking to someone named Tony. "You make me feel alive," she said, and that was all it took to shatter my world. I don't know how long I stood there, shock coursing through my veins. I wanted to burst through the door and confront her right then, but a part of me wanted to hold onto the sliver of hope that I was mistaken. Maybe it was just a friend. But deep down, I knew better. The way she spoke didn't sound like a friend. It sounded intimate. After what felt like forever, I heard the bathroom door open and I quickly retreated back to bed, my heart pounding. That night, sleep evaded me. My mind raced through a whirlwind of emotions, betrayal, anger, and heartbreak. I could feel the storm brewing inside, and I knew I had to confront her. I needed answers, and I wanted to hear the truth from her lips. Would she come clean, or would she try to lie her way out of it? The thought of facing her the next day made my stomach churn. The next morning, I acted as if everything were normal. We had breakfast together, but I could barely muster a smile. Melissa chattered away about her plans for the day, but my mind was fixated on one thing, this betrayal that had pierced my heart. As soon as she left for work, I was left alone with my thoughts, consumed by the reality of what I had heard. I needed to gather my thoughts and prepare myself for the confrontation that was to come. When she returned home, the tension was palpable. I could feel it thickening the air as I paced around the living room. There was no avoiding it any longer. It was time to address the elephant in the room, and I knew this would change everything. As she walked in, I took a deep breath and steeled myself for what was to come. I was ready now, ready to demand the truth and to unveil the lies that had been woven into the fabric of our lives. As I stood there, my heart felt like it was caught in a vice grip. Melissa walked in, her face lit up with a smile that felt so out of place given what I'd discovered. I wanted to scream, to throw everything in her face, but I forced myself to take a deep breath. Anger was boiling inside me, but I needed to keep my cool for this. I had to confront her without losing it. "Hey, honey," she said, walking over to give me a quick peck on the cheek. I stiffened at her touch. "How was your day? Can we talk?" I replied, my voice steady but laced with an edge that I hoped would convey the seriousness of the moment. Her smile faltered slightly, but she nodded, leading me to the couch. Once we were seated, I took a moment to gather my thoughts. I could see her fidgeting, brushing her hair behind her ear and glancing around the room, avoiding my gaze. I needed to change that. "I heard you last night," I said, my voice low but firm. "You were on the phone with Tony." The way her face changed in an instant felt like a punch to my gut. It was a mix of shock and an urgent need to cover up. Jake, I can explain, explain. I interrupted, my pulse quickening. You make me feel alive. What could you possibly explain that would justify that? She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. I could see her scrambling for a way out, her mind racing as rapidly as mine. Finally, she managed to find her voice. It's not what you think. Tony is just a friend from the gym. Stop lying. I shot back, my voice rising. I heard you, Melissa. You were flirting with him. I don't need to hear your excuses. I deserve better than this. Her eyes widened and I could see the realization hit her. The facade she had built around our marriage was crumbling. I didn't mean it like that. It just happened. I was feeling lost and he was there for me. Lost. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You're lost and you turn to another man. What about us, Melissa? What about our marriage, our vows? She looked away, shame coloring her cheeks. I know I messed up, Jake. I wasn't thinking. I didn't want to hurt you. I thought I could handle it. Handle it. I felt a surge of anger. You think cheating is handling anything. This isn't just a mistake. This is a betrayal. Do you even understand what you've done? Her expression shifted from guilt to defensiveness. You were always so busy with work, Jake. I felt alone. I wasn't getting what I needed from you, and I thought it was harmless. The conversation began to spiral out of control, and I felt like I was fighting against a tidal wave of emotions. I wanted to yell to make her understand the depth of my hurt, but part of me was still trying to process the magnitude of her betrayal. I felt like I was talking to a stranger, a woman I didn't recognize anymore. Do you really think this is my fault? I asked, incredulous. I work hard to provide for us. I thought you were happy. I thought we were happy. Melissa leaned in, her expression softening slightly. I was, but I needed connection and I thought I could find it elsewhere. I didn't want it to get this far, too late for that. I said, shaking my head. You've crossed a line that can't be erased. I feel like I don't even know who you are anymore. The tears began to well up in her eyes and I could see her struggling to hold it together. Please don't say that. I love you, Jake. I made a terrible mistake and I want to fix this. Fix this. The word felt foreign coming from her lips. How do you fix something broken beyond repair? How do you fix trust that's been shattered? I don't know if I can ever look at you the same way again. The silence that followed was deafening. She looked down, her hands wringing together nervously. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, staring down into an abyss. I didn't know what to do next. Did I want to fight for what we had, or was it too late? I need time to think, I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. It wasn't much of a resolution, but it felt like the only thing I could say in that moment. I didn't want to make any hasty decisions, even if my heart screamed for me to leave her right then and there. As I stood up to walk away, the weight of the conversation hung heavy in the air. I felt every step I took reverberate through the very foundation of our marriage. I was reeling from betrayal and heartbreak, and all I could think about was how to pick up the pieces of my shattered world. The emotional impact was profound. One moment I was happily married, and in the next, I felt like I had lost everything. How could this happen? How could the woman I loved betray me so completely? I sank onto the couch, feeling utterly alone, staring at the walls of the home we had built together. I didn't know what lay ahead, but I felt certain that everything had changed in an instant. I spent the next few days in a haze, grappling with the emotional fallout of that confrontation. My world had been turned upside down, leaving me feeling like a ghost haunting my own life. I went through the motions, going to work, pretending to be engaged in my tasks, but inside I was a mess. I had never felt so lost, and the weight of betrayal hung heavily on my shoulders. Melissa and I hardly spoke after that night. The silence in our home was deafening, a stark contrast to the laughter and love that once filled the space. I could feel the tension between us, thick and suffocating. Every time I walked into a room, I half expected her to say something, to apologize again, but she remained quiet, and I was too hurt to initiate any conversation. It was clear that we were both standing on opposite sides of an emotional chasm, and the bridge had been burned. I started spending more time at work, burying myself in projects. It was a good distraction, an escape from the reality of my life. But even there, the shadows of betrayal followed me. I'd catch myself daydreaming about the life I thought I had, only to be jolted back to the present by a notification on my phone, reminding me of the chaos waiting for me at home. One evening, after another long day at the office, I decided to stop by a nearby bar for a drink before heading home. I needed to clear my head, even if just for a moment. As I settled onto a bar stool, I looked around, trying to find solace in the familiar atmosphere. That's when I spotted an old friend, Mark, sitting a few seats down. He was a good guy, someone I hadn't seen in ages, and I figured it might do me some good to talk to someone who knew me before my world came crashing down. "Jake, is that you?" he called out, raising his glass in greeting. "Mark, good to see you, man," I replied, forcing a smile as I joined him. We exchanged pleasantries, and I could feel the weight of my troubles lifting, if only for a moment. As we chatted, he noticed my distracted demeanor. "You all right? You look like you've got the weight of the world on your shoulders." I sighed, not wanting to burden him with my problems, but the words tumbled out before I could stop them. "It's just, my marriage is falling apart. My wife cheated on me." Mark's expression shifted to one of concern. "Man, I'm sorry to hear that. Do you want to talk about it?" I didn't have to think twice. "Yeah, I guess I do. It's just been a nightmare. I don't even know how to process it." As I recounted the story of my wife's betrayal, I could feel the anger and sadness rising within me. I spoke of her excuses, her lies, and the way she had dismissed my feelings. Mark listened intently, offering support without judgment. By the end of my rant, I felt a little lighter. "Have you thought about what you want to do?" he asked, his voice steady. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to fight for what we had, but the other part—" I paused, clenching my fists as I fought against the swell of emotions. "I feel like I'm just going to keep getting hurt." Mark nodded thoughtfully. "It's a tough call, but you deserve to be happy, man. You shouldn't have to settle for a half-hearted relationship." His words struck a chord. I had spent so much time trying to reconcile my feelings for Melissa with the pain she had caused me. Maybe it was time to focus on myself. Maybe it was time to start thinking about my own happiness. After a couple of beers, I felt emboldened. I didn't have all the answers, but I knew I had to regain control of my life. As I left the bar, I felt a flicker of determination ignite inside me. I needed to take action to reclaim my sense of self and independence. The next day, I decided to take a step that would symbolize my newfound resolve. I had always wanted a tattoo, something meaningful, but I had put it off for years. Now felt like the perfect time. I wanted something that represented freedom and success, a reminder that I could stand on my own 2 feet, no matter what. I did some research and found a well-reviewed tattoo artist named Chris who specialized in unique designs. I scheduled an appointment for that weekend. The anticipation of getting the tattoo filled me with excitement, a welcome distraction from the turmoil of my life. When the day finally arrived, I walked into the tattoo studio, feeling a mix of nerves and anticipation. The walls were adorned with incredible artwork, showcasing the talent of the artists who worked there. Chris greeted me with a warm smile, and I explained what I was looking for. "I want something that symbolizes freedom and success," I said, my voice steady. "Something that reminds me that I can stand strong on my own." He nodded, taking notes, and we started discussing design ideas. As I spoke, I could feel the weight of my troubles dissipating, replaced by a sense of purpose. It was liberating to think about my future, regardless of what had happened in the past. After settling on a design, a soaring bird intertwined with a winding vine, symbolizing growth and independence, I felt a surge of excitement. I was ready to embrace this new chapter, to mark my skin as a testament to my journey. The tattooing process itself was a mix of pain and exhilaration. As the needle pierced my skin, I felt a rush of adrenaline. This was it. I was reclaiming my identity, my sense of self, and the pain was a reminder that I was alive, that I could endure and rise above. When Chris finished, he revealed the tattoo, and I couldn't help but smile. It was everything I had envisioned and more. As I looked in the mirror, I felt an overwhelming sense of pride wash over me. This was no longer just about Melissa and her betrayal. This was about me, my independence, and my journey forward. I left the studio with a renewed sense of purpose, ready to embrace the unknown. I didn't have all the answers, but I knew I would fight for my happiness, whatever that might look like. The tattoo was more than just ink on my skin. It felt like a new beginning. As I stood in front of the mirror, examining the intricate design, I realized I was ready to take control of my life. Pain from the tattoo was a reminder that I had endured heartache, but it was also a symbol of resilience. With my newfound confidence, I returned home, the evening sun casting a warm glow across our living room. Melissa was there, her eyes wide as they fell on my arm. "You got a tattoo?" she asked, a mixture of shock and disbelief coloring her voice. "Yeah, I did," I replied, trying to gauge her reaction. "It represents freedom and success, a reminder to myself that I can stand on my own." Her expression darkened and I could see her disappointment. "Jake, I don't think this is the way to handle what's happening between us." "Maybe it's not about us anymore, Melissa," I countered, my voice steady. "I need to focus on me now. I've spent too long trying to salvage something that might be beyond repair." "I thought we were going to work on this together," she pleaded, desperation creeping into her tone. "I want to fix things, Jake. I love you." Her words fell flat against the walls that had built up between us. "Love isn't enough when trust is gone," I said, feeling a mixture of sadness and resolve. "You've broken that trust, and I don't know if I can ever get it back." "I made a mistake," she insisted, tears welling in her eyes. "I didn't mean for it to go that far. I was confused, and I thought it was just a phase. I thought—" "You thought what?" I interrupted, my frustration boiling over. "That you could have your cake and eat it too. You can't just gloss over this with apologies." There was a beat of silence as we stared at each other, both of us bracing for the words that hung heavy in the air. I felt the familiar ache in my chest, but this time, instead of retreating, I stood my ground. I wasn't willing to let her excuses pull me back into a cycle of pain. "I need more time to think, Melissa. I need to figure out what I want," I said, my voice softening ever so slightly. "But right now I can't do this with you. It's too painful." She nodded slowly, the weight of my words settling over her. "I understand," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I hope you'll consider giving us another chance." I didn't respond. I turned and walked away, leaving her in the living room. I felt the sting of tears in my eyes as I retreated to our bedroom. The emotional toll was exhausting, and I had no idea what the future held, but I knew I needed to be strong for myself. Over the next several days, I focused on healing. I took long walks, rediscovered old hobbies, and spent time with friends. I started going to the gym regularly, finding solace in the physical exertion. Each time I looked at my tattoo, I felt empowered, a constant reminder that I was capable of more than I realized. But I also faced the reality of Melissa's attempts to reach out. She would text, trying to engage me in conversation, asking how my day was or commenting on the weather. I was tempted to respond, tempted to slip back into the comfortable rhythm we once had, but I resisted. I needed to draw a clear line between our past and whatever future lay ahead. One evening, I received a text from Mark asking if I wanted to join him and some friends for a game night. I was hesitant at first, but the thought of being around people who cared about me felt appealing. After a moment's consideration, I agreed. When I arrived at Mark's place, I was greeted by laughter and a sense of camaraderie that had been missing from my life for a while. It felt good to be around friends, to share a few drinks and play games without the weight of my marriage hanging over my head. As the night wore on, I found myself actually laughing, enjoying the moment. It felt liberating to be in a space where I could be myself without the burden of betrayal tethering me down. Midway through the evening, as we played cards, Mark leaned over and said, "You seem a lot lighter tonight, Jake. I'm glad to see you smiling again." "Thanks, man," I replied, surprised at how true his words felt. "I've been working on it. I think I'm finally starting to find my way back to who I was before everything went down." "I'm proud of you," he said, raising his glass in a toast. "To new beginnings." "To new beginnings," I echoed, clinking my glass against his. As the night wrapped up, I felt a sense of relief settle over me. I was starting to reclaim my life, and for the first time in a while, I could see a glimmer of hope on the horizon. I didn't know what the future held, but I was determined to face it head-on, whether that was with Melissa or on my own. Back at home, I couldn't help but think about the decisions I had to make. The tattoo on my arm reminded me that I had the power to choose my path. I could either cling to the remnants of a relationship that had been shattered or embrace this opportunity for growth. The thought of moving on was both terrifying and exhilarating. In the days that followed, I started to reflect on what I wanted for myself. I began to consider whether I could truly forgive Melissa, whether I could find a way to rebuild our relationship, or if it was time to cut my losses and seek a new chapter entirely. Every day brought new clarity, and with each passing moment, I felt myself evolving. I was no longer just Jake, the husband. I was Jake, the man reclaiming his identity. The emotional scars were still fresh, but I was learning to navigate them, learning to stand tall despite the pain. The thought of revenge began to creep into my mind, an idea almost as intoxicating as the freedom I had just begun to embrace. I wanted Melissa to feel the weight of her actions, to understand the depth of the hurt she had caused. But as I grappled with those thoughts, I reminded myself that revenge might not be the answer. Instead, I wanted to channel that energy into my own growth and healing. Was there a way to ensure that she understood the consequences of her betrayal without losing myself in a quest for vengeance? The answer eluded me, but I knew I had to tread carefully as I continued to navigate this emotional storm. I felt like I was standing at a crossroads, and with each passing day, I was inching closer to the decision that would shape the rest of my life. It was time to confront what I truly wanted and take the next step toward whatever future lay ahead. As the days passed, I found myself searching for answers in the quiet moments. The tattoo on my arm was a constant reminder of my journey, but the emotional turmoil surrounding my marriage was still there, lingering like a shadow. I had spent so long trying to make sense of Melissa's betrayal that I was left grappling with the question of what to do next. One afternoon, while sitting in a cafe with a cup of coffee, I received a text from Melissa. It was a simple message, a photo of the two of us from happier times, one of those candid shots where we were laughing together, blissfully unaware of the storm that was brewing beneath the surface. The sight of it stirred a mix of emotions within me, nostalgia, sorrow, and anger. I hesitated before responding, unsure if I even wanted to engage, but part of me felt compelled to reply to acknowledge the memories we had shared. Good times, I typed back, my heart heavy as I hit send. A moment later, my phone buzzed again. I miss that, Jake, I miss us. Can we talk? The question hung in the air like a heavy fog, and I knew I had a decision to make. Did I want to talk? Did I want to give her the opportunity to explain further or make her case for a second chance? I thought about how I had spent the last few weeks focusing on my own healing, and I felt a surge of inner strength pushing me to consider what that conversation could mean. I'll think about it, I replied and put my phone down. In truth, I was torn. My heart ached for the memories of what we once had, but the reality of her betrayal loomed large over everything. I began to think about what I wanted to say if I did agree to meet. I needed to lay everything bare, my pain, my anger, and my doubts. I had to make sure that this conversation happened on my terms. Later that evening, I finally reached a point where I was ready to talk. I texted Melissa back, suggesting we meet at the same cafe where I had received her message. Tomorrow at 6. I sent, my heart racing as I hit send. The next day arrived and I was a bundle of nerves. I arrived early, sipping my coffee while I tried to gather my thoughts. I went over the things I wanted to say, the feelings I needed to express. I needed her to understand that her actions had consequences, that the trust we had built was not something to be taken lightly. When she arrived, my heart pounded in my chest. Melissa walked in, looking beautiful yet vulnerable. She wore a sundress that reminded me of happier days and had a hint of hesitation in her step. I could tell she was nervous, too. "Thanks for meeting me," she said, her voice soft as she took a seat across from me. "Yeah, I replied, scrutinizing her expression. I thought it was time we talked. A heavy silence hung between us, and I could feel the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on us. Finally, she spoke. "I've had a lot of time to think, Jake, about us, about everything. I really messed up, and I'm so sorry for hurting you." "Sorry doesn't quite cut it, Melissa," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "You've shattered my trust. I can't just forget that you chose to betray me." "I understand," she replied, her eyes glistening with tears. "I know I can't take back what I did, but I want you to know that it didn't mean I didn't love you. I was confused and lost, and I made a terrible choice." I shook my head, feeling anger bubbling to the surface. "Confused? That's no excuse for what you did. You had a choice every step of the way, and you chose him instead of me." "I know," she said, her voice breaking. "I can't change the past, but I want to change the future. I want to fight for us, Jake. I want to rebuild what we had." The desperation in her voice struck a chord within me, but I couldn't ignore the bitterness that lingered. "How do I know you won't just do it again? How can I trust you after this?" "I can prove it to you," she urged, leaning forward. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes to earn back your trust. I'll go to counseling, I'll be open about everything. Just give me a chance to show you I can change." Her words hung in the air, a promise wrapped in desperation. I could see the sincerity in her eyes, but I also felt the weight of my own feelings pressing down on me. It was hard to reconcile the woman I loved with the one who had hurt me so deeply. "Melissa," I said, trying to keep my voice calm and steady, "I loved you with everything I had, but love alone isn't enough to repair what's been broken. Trust is earned, and right now, you've made it incredibly difficult for me to even consider it." She nodded slowly, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I know, and I don't expect it to happen overnight. I just want the opportunity to show you I can be better, that I can be the wife you deserve." I took a deep breath, feeling my resolve wavering. I didn't want to let her back into my life only to be hurt again, but the flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, things could be different made me hesitate. "I need time to think about it," I finally said, my voice firm yet compassionate. "I can't make any promises right now." "Okay," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I just hope you'll consider it." As we sat there, the weight of the conversation settled over us like a thick fog. I was torn between the memories of love and happiness and the reality of betrayal that had shattered my world. I wanted to believe in the possibility of reconciliation, but the scars ran deep. As we finished our coffees, I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. She was scared, vulnerable, and desperate for a chance at redemption. But I was scared, too. Scared of going back to a life where I could be hurt again, scared of opening myself up to more pain, walking away from. The cafe, I felt a mix of anger and hope swirling within me. I didn't have all the answers, but I knew I had a choice to make. The road ahead was uncertain, and the decision weighed heavily on my heart. Whatever I chose, I knew I had to prioritize my own healing and well-being. As I drove home, I realized I wasn't just grappling with Melissa's betrayal. I was also on a journey of self-discovery, learning to stand tall and reclaim my identity. The choice lay ahead of me, and no matter what happened, I was ready to face it. The tattoo on my arm pulsed with meaning. It was a reminder of my freedom, my resilience, and my determination to rise above the pain. I was ready to embrace whatever came next, whether that was finding a path back to Melissa or forging a new journey entirely on my own. The days following my conversation with Melissa were filled with intense reflection. I went through a whirlwind of emotions: anger at her betrayal, sadness over what we had lost, and confusion about what the future held. I found it challenging to focus on much else, constantly replaying our talk in mind. On one hand, the thought of reconciliation stirred a flicker of hope within me. On the other, the fear of being hurt again loomed large, a dark cloud hanging over my every thought. I took time for myself, leaning into the things that made me feel alive. I spent evenings at the gym, read books I had always wanted to explore, and took long walks to clear my mind. Each step was a reminder that I was reclaiming my life, and I needed to honor that journey, regardless of what happened with Melissa. Eventually, I decided to reach out to a therapist. I wanted to talk through my feelings, to lay out the complexities of my situation and get a professional perspective. I found a local therapist who specialized in relationship issues, and as I sat down in their cozy office, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. Talking to someone who could provide insight felt liberating. Over the course of several sessions, I articulated my feelings of betrayal, my fears about trusting Melissa again, and the desire for independence that had grown within me. The therapist offered valuable insights, suggesting that I focus on my own healing first, regardless of whether I chose to reconcile with her. One evening, after a particularly eye-opening session, I sat in my car, contemplating the advice I had received. I thought about the tattoo on my arm, its symbolism meant to remind me of my strength and independence. It was then that clarity hit me. I needed to communicate my decision to Melissa, not out of anger or vindictiveness, but from a place of honesty and respect for both her and myself. That night I sent her a text, suggesting we meet again at the cafe. I felt a mix of nerves and resolve as I composed the message. When I arrived, I spotted her sitting at a table, staring into her cup of coffee, her expression a mix of hope and anxiety. As I approached, I could see the way her eyes lit up at my presence, but I also noted the underlying tension in her frame. "Thanks for meeting me," I said, taking a seat across from her. "Of course," she replied, her voice steady but tinged with nervousness. "I've been thinking about everything you said." "Me too," I said, deciding to cut to the chase. "I've spent a lot of time reflecting on our relationship and what's happened. I really want to be honest with you about where I stand." She nodded, her eyes wide and hopeful. "I'm ready to listen." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision I was about to make. "I think you know that rebuilding trust is going to take time, and I'm not sure if I'm ready to dive back into that right now. I need to prioritize my own healing before we can even think about the possibility of us." Expression shifted to one of disappointment, but I pressed on. "I need to be clear. I think it's best for both of us if we take some time apart. I don't want to live in a situation where I'm constantly on guard, waiting for the other shoe to drop. I need to focus on myself and my own growth." Tears welled in her eyes and she nodded slowly. "I understand, Jake, I really do. I just wish it didn't have to be this way." "I wish it didn't either," I said gently. "But I have to be true to myself, and right now I believe this is what I need. I hope in time we can both find a way to heal, whether that's separately or together." The silence that followed was heavy, almost unbearable. I watched as she absorbed my words, her face a mixture of sadness and acceptance. "I want you to be happy, Jake. You deserve that." "I hope you find your happiness too, Melissa," I replied, my heart aching for the woman I once loved. "You have so much potential, and I truly want the best for you." We sat there for a while longer, lost in our thoughts, acknowledging the finality of the moment. The cafe buzzed around us, but in that small bubble it felt like time had stopped. I felt a sense of closure begin to settle in, a bittersweet relief that I was finally making the choice that was right for me. As we left the cafe, I turned to her one last time. "Take care of yourself, Melissa." "You too, Jake," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I'll always care about you." I walked away from that meeting feeling a mixture of sadness and liberation. I had prioritized my needs, taking a stand for my emotional well-being. I didn't know what the future would hold, whether Melissa and I would eventually find our way back to each other or if we would remain strangers. In that moment, I felt a profound sense of freedom wash over me. I'd taken control of my life, made the difficult choice, and now it was time to embrace the journey ahead. The tattoo on my arm was a reminder of the strength I had found within myself, a symbol of my independence. As I drove home, I felt lighter, unburdened. I knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful. I was ready to embrace whatever came next, confident that I would rise above the pain, reclaim my happiness, and discover what it meant to truly move forward.